independent political and economic news analysis by the economist Jargal. Our gazette is published in Mongolian, English, Japanese, and Russian. Please order your subscription online at www.jargaldefacto.com or from the post office called Mongol Shudan near you. Also, you can order by phone at 7007 8916.
One is the fund of future.
Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review, our weekly in-depth analysis on the current news and affairs with our commentator and economist, Mr. Jargal Defacto.
Good evening.
And I'm your host, Namsred Sindh. You can join in on our conversation on MNB World Facebook page and on Twitter with hashtag Jargal_Defacto. Now let's get into our first topics for today. Loan repayments and interest have been deferred. The politics of the Tavan Tolgoi mine. $300 billion Mongolian Turuks in loans for the cashmere industry. Now let's get into our first topic for today. The Council for Financial Stability convened on Wednesday to discuss ways to decrease the impact of COVID-19 on the Mongolian economy. Minister of Finance Hurl Batur and President of the Bank of Mongolia, Lauk Sorung, held a press briefing on the cabinet's decision to defer payments and interest for consumer and business loans for 19 days. So our first question about this topic is that who will be covering the losses for loan interest and payment deferrals? Will the banks themselves will be responsible, or the people and entities pay for it?
Well, before coming to this topic, we should say that this is due to coronavirus pandemic. Mongolian government, in particular banking sector and central bank, started to have certain measures. First, it was a banking policy rate is changed last week, a week before, and also the required reserve also changed for 2% down. And this week, as you said, they have deferred for 90 days the payment of loan and interest rate. And your question about who is going to pay them during this time is no doubt it is to be paid by whoever had borrowed the money. This is just consumption loan, so-called consuming loan, 1.5 trillion tugriks, which is around $530 million US, and it is about 10% of the total loan portfolio of the country, and it has to do with some 1,000 companies and individuals. So it's a relatively limited impact it will have on the total economy, and because half of the Mongolian commercial bank's loan portfolio is a loan for individuals, and another half is for businesses. So we talk about only 10%, which I see will not much impact immediately on the way the economy is going on. The true problem is now we are due to the coronavirus quarantine. Many shops, many places are, like in many countries in the world, are closed in Mongolia. Though the situation is a little bit better because we have only 10 cases of coronavirus, mostly imported from Europe, all import from Europe. But because Mongolia has been checking each plane very carefully, they have sent the special charter flights. So Mongolia kind of controlling the situation, in particular the dissemination of the disease. So, however, still we face this. We call it now coronavirus.
So, who will cover the losses of the bank loans and payment referrals?
No doubt
deferred?
it will be covered by those who ever had borrowed. The issue is what they have actually changed is the classification of a loan quality according to Mongol bank regulations to commercial banks. In Mongolia, they have, like it's Basel III standard, they have classified into 4 categories commercial banks. Loan, if it is not paid, for example, more than 6 months, it's becoming a doubtful loan, then it will be a special category. And if the loan is not paid on for a year or so or over, it is regarded bad loan. And bad loan has in the balance sheet of the commercial banks, there is a particular provision which says a risk fund for recovering risky loans. So what exactly it happens is, after this change happens, is Mongol Bank is allowing commercial banks to change all the terms for another 6 months, but not changing the classification. So that's all, and actually it's increasing a bit risk of commercial banks.
So what consequences will the banks face after changing the risk regulations?
Well,
like this?
They will change. They will not change the risk qualification of the loan according to the previous one. Now, according to the new regulations, the bank still will be regarding normal if the loan is not paid for 6 months. It substantially does not change much the situation, and it will increase, of course, a risk of commercial banks, and it may also cause certain decrease of a loan amount or available loan amount for consumers, and definitely it will delay possible loan term for another 6 months.
I see. So last year they limited the consumer loan amount last year. So if they hadn't do that, would the banking sectors be having an even harder time right now?
Yeah, I think it was a good measure last year because, as I said, 10% of our bank credit portfolio is the consumer loan, and last year they have changed the rate of debt to income to 70%, which was not the limit before. It doesn't matter how much the consumer could borrow, and which brought a lot of social problems in the country. And more than that, they have reduced the terms of the loan from 5 years to 3. In this way, I think the loan quality in general became a bit better of quality, and also it was less risk for people, in particular those who is in Mongolia. The people receive a lot of pension loan, salary loan, and now I think if it was not done before, we could have even harder time by this time now.
So are the measures being taken by the government actually enough? And what do you think the government should do next to decrease the impact of COVID-19 on the economy?
If you compare with other countries, it is certainly not enough. It is mostly monetary policy regulations that be changed, but nothing is done with budget. In particular, Minister of Finance is refusing to have amendments in the budget, though he had lost first 2 months budget revenue, and which will require definitely to change the expenses structure of the budget, which is we call it election year budget, and many investments into the constituencies of deputies are planned, and the society is demanding to restrict or to defer those investments, which we can defer to the next year until a good time, and the money is supposed to be used for other purposes. And I think Mongolian government should pay particular to one issue, which is the employment issue. Employment issue, and like many other countries like Germany, the government should use every possible resources to keep jobs there, in particular because already a month or so people are not working full time here, and many people have given a holiday to their employees without salary. So this, if the government is not taking a right measure on time, it may multiply to more problems which will cause more damage to the economy. So the government is not doing enough for coronaviruses. They do their best for coronaviruses.
Okay, so I think it's time for us to get into our second topic for today. Over the last few days, politicians have expressed their opinions on Tavan Tolgoi's launch of an IPO for 30% of the company's shares. In June 2018, Parliament issued a decree to increase production at the Tavan Tolgoi coal mine. The decree included launching an IPO for 30% of Tavan Tolgoi's shares on the international stock market to attract investment. However, former head of the office of the President of Mongolia, Enkhbold, has said that this decree should be amended because the funds from the IPO are no longer required. So our first question about this topic is that why was the launch of Tavan Tolgoi IPO cancelled or is going to be amended?
It was not officially cancelled by the cabinet, and the cabinet is discussing the issue. Most probably they're going to postpone this one before election, which is a right decision anyway, because this is not good time for IPO for such a company like this. And in particular, it's before the election. But before every election in Mongolia, two major political parties, Democratic Party and People's Party, are always raising the issue either of Oyu Tolgoi or Tavan Tolgoi, and this time is not exclusion as well. And the former speaker is raising the issue and citing that the required money for IPO of Tavan Tolgoi, $5.2 billion US, according to the Minister of Mining, Sumaya Bazar. Enkhbold said that it's already there. $3.6 billion have already raised through accumulation of profit and not giving dividends by Erdenes Tavan Tolgoi for the last 2 years. And it was they were going to give a dividend because every adult person of Mongolia owns around 1,000 shares of this company, which already means that this is a public company. Unfortunately, this company never works as a public company, and they're not asking the public or those who owns several, about maybe 27 or so % of the Tavan Tolgoi by all citizens, but not ask their opinion on that decisions. One, secondly, I'm not surprised there is always conflict between two political parties, but there is also inside of a party, ruling party, because one thing that Minister of Finance is saying, the other thing is the head of the Erdenes Tavan Tolgoi is saying. Sometimes, at times, it goes to two directions.
So, as you mentioned, those who are in power seem to be doing whatever they want with Tavan Tolgoi before every election. So, what should be done to stop this, or at least prevent this from, happening every election?
Tavan Tolgoi means 5 heads in Mongolia. It's like Tavan Tolgoi is always taken by 5 directions, like the fairy tale by Russian famous author Krylov said, that it's like a swan, and it's like the fish, bird, and crab are trying to take a card to their own directions. As a result, there's moving nowhere. Very similar picture with Tavan Tolgoi by our political parties. And you asked when it will be solved. It will be solved only when the Mongolian government management, particularly this largest coking coal deposit, is completely transparent. which I think will take quite some time. Recently, for example, the railroad from Tavan Tolgoi to the southern border project was taken by a company called Body International that belongs to the owner of Column Bank. And we just learned later on that this big project was given without any tender. And the CEO of Tavan Tolgoi, Tavan Tolgoi, is saying that we have given to this company because they are promising to raise required $1 billion to continue the half-done project of a railway, and they will pay. They will ask us to pay not with the cash but with the coal. Yeah, sounds good, but where was the tender? So if this big project goes like this, then where is the whole principles of the free market? And also recently there is a rumor, there is a claim by an economist, Naram Batar, about the speaker approach to Tavan Tolgoi. He claimed that he is doing a favor for his brother's related company Strato, which was refused by that company, and it is now going to the court, and I don't know what's going to be there. But if it is true, then it's nothing surprise, because many political leaders in the country are using their political power in favor of at least themselves or clientelist companies.
So what can the people do to at least shorten the amount of time that the government will actually make Tavan Tolgoi transparent? What can we do?
Very simple questions. As any other public company, this company should be completely transparent. They should at least publish their annual report every year or every quarter, like in many normal stock market developed countries. Yet this Tavan Tolgoi, if you go to its website, it's in Mongolian, and in Mongolian the financial report of the company is, the final one was a second quarter of last year. Almost a year they keep going without reporting shareholders about their financial situations. How with this situation you're going to buy shares even if they do IPO shortly? So if I'm asked to buy shares, I will not, because it is not transparent company. They are not bothering themselves to report the public about the financial activity of the company. And not only the report is to be there, but also it should be audited, if possible, by international, reliable, reputable, large the auditing company, which is not the case. So I think for Mongolian state-owned enterprises to go for IPO, they at least need to report their financials on time. And I'm asking the FRC, the Financial Regulatory Commission Authority, there is a new boss, and ask them, what are you doing there? Why you are not forcing this company to report the financials? Secondly, the board of this company are consisting of people that we don't know. They are all public officials, government officials, heads of other agencies, etc., etc. And who is representing us, who owns each 10,000 shares of the company? This kind of questions to be answered before it goes to IPO in any way.
So, despite the non-transparency issues, that Tavan Tolgoi produced a decent amount of revenue last year. So, should the company keep doing what they're doing as it is?
Well, according to the former speaker in Kabul, Tavan Tolgoi had raised already $3.6 billion fund, enough to pay the railroad to two directions, surprisingly to south and to east. And so there is already fund raised and no need to have an IPO for the amount that the Minister of Mining is planning. So let's see what exactly is going on. But one thing is clear, that this IPO cannot happen before this election. And it will not be surprised if it doesn't happen this year, within this year at all, because this coronavirus economic situations and the new political power that are supposed to come after the elections. Yet there is a rumor, talk about the possible delaying, postponing the election for another year or so, because by law, if election is postponed, it's to be postponed a year, a term. So on the other side, it could be very bad incident that they can delay or postpone elections, which never happened before, but it may be happening this year in Mongolia.
Great, thank you for that. Now let's get into our third topic for today. During the cabinet's meeting on Thursday, a resolution was approved for measures to support the Kashmir sector of Mongolia. A 300 billion Tugruk soft loan will be provided to Kashmir producers, and an additional 30 billion Tugruk in state funds will be provided to reduce the interest rates for these loans. The loans will be provided by the Development Bank of Mongolia. So our first question is that are these loans really necessary? Because some people say that this is just politicians preparing for the elections and trying to win over voters.
Well, it has certain sentiment inside. Mongolia is the second largest producer of cashmere. 40% of the world cashmere is produced in Mongolia, 48% in China, though in this Chinese statistics, probably a quarter maybe from Mongolia, as Mongolia is exporting just washed cashmere to China. 65% of our cashmere is going as a washed cashmere. Somehow the law is allowing them to do so. Only 25% of cashmere are produced and processed and up to last product in Mongolia, and 10% tops or cleaned combed cashmere, which is the major product for knit, goes export to Italy and other many countries. So how efficient is, how productive is the industry for the Mongolian economy? If you take from a perspective that has to do with every Mongolian, it is unfortunately has a very bad consequences, because according to the last estimate, we have 70 million over cattle in Mongolia, out of which 41 million of them is 49%, 41% of them, or around 31 or so million of them are goats, which produce cashmere. But unfortunately, goats are destroying the pasture land of Mongolia. 70% of the territory is pasture land, and 70% of the pasture land is already deforested. It is kind of already gobi, and which is too much cost for all Mongolians, because many people now migrate from countryside to Ulaanbaatar and other cities because they have lost their pasture land. There's no sense to grow anymore, and we have more overgrazed. We have overgrazed pasture land, and we have more goats than the country can afford. That's why the politicians are very reluctant to set pasture land tax, which is one of the instruments of successful practices avoiding tragedy of commons, according to the Nobel Prize economist Armstrong. This is the commune who can manage that situation better. So the Mongolia is not very much reluctant to shift to their positions where the herdsmen themselves are participating in the management of the pasture land. Those who are misusing or overusing the pasture land, agreed among themselves, they have to pay a tax for that. So and every year putting this amount of money from a budget looks like best solution if you take into consideration the interest of all the stakeholders.
So supposedly the government will finance the 5% of the development bank's 10% interest rate. So yeah. Why is the government paying for this, and what about other sectors? They haven't done anything like this to other sectors.
Well, government finds the Kashmir is very important diversification of our export, which almost 80% depends on coal and copper. It's a good approach. Yes, we have to support our Kashmir industry, and its unique industry. It could develop much better, but it is a matter of not quantity. It is a matter of quality. So, if we properly manage, the herders should pay more attention to quality of Kashmir than the quantity of the goats. And yes, there are 230,000 families. 230,000 herders are related to our animal husbandry, and as a goat, if you divide it, looks like almost half of them are busy with a goat. But if this money, in particular subsidized money, 5%, also paid by budget, looks like this policy is not always right. Maybe it's a time to maybe close border, to stop exporting any Kashmir other than final products, or at least the tops, so that the more value is created inside of the country in the value chain of Kashmir. Because somehow 65% of Kashmir goes to China, thanks to the many joint ventures with China, we have a deep processing factory 15, semi of initial processing factory 23, knit factory 59, and some almost 200 family workshop is working in this industry. Maybe it's a time to stop export any Kashmir raw materials, even if it's in the form of washed Kashmir as it is now. So we need to change that policy.
So if we stop the export, do we have the capacity to process all those Kashmir and make it into a product? Do we have the capacity for that?
Yes, those factories I have mentioned, it could process everything, because it's more than even a process. 10,000 tons of Kashmir, and these factories all work maybe 30-20% of its capacity. So Mongolia has enough domestic processing capacity for all 10,000 Kashmir if they close the border for washed Kashmir, which somehow is a very much prevailing lobby of herdsmen. They say that thanks to Chinese buying with competing with Mongolians, that's why they can sell Kashmir with higher price. Yes, but at which cost? We don't want to see to end up at the end the no pasture land, all completely overgrazed, but only a few Kashmir is there. So this is not looks like final or best solutions. That's why this time at our program I would like to draw your attention, the all Mongolian audience attention to this point, where at which cost we are producing Kashmir products.
So how will the herders be affected if we close the export?
I think initially there will be, initially there may be the price, which is, they said this year, should be not less than 100,000 tugruk for 1 kilo, which the argument is, if we don't give Mongolians, Kashmir companies money to buy their Kashmir from herders, then Chinese come and buy with support of their own banks, which give them a loan with very low interest rate, with which Mongolian companies cannot compete. So if we close the border for raw material, then I think this competition will be ended. Okay, I think it's at the end good solutions.
Thank you for that. Unfortunately, that is all the time we had for today. We will see you next week with more topics.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice evening. Goodbye.